Hey guys, in this video the brilliant Mr. B is going to be taking you through column multiplication. So do multiplication, multiplying long numbers without using a calculator. If you want more examples, there are thousands waiting for you over on my website.
Column multiplication follows similar rules to column addition and column subtraction. So if we're doing 2 times 42, what we are going to do is line up the tens and units like we did when adding or subtracting. So the 2 units in the 2 is lined up with the 2 units in the 42. A little tip is to put the largest number on top, and I'll explain why that is when we move on to the hard questions. Another tip is that when you rule off, just rule off one line, don't put one at the bottom. The reason for this will come to when we move on to the medium questions. Now, the difference between column multiplication and column addition and subtraction is that you're multiplying every number by every other number. So multiplying by 2, we're not just multiplying the 2 units by 2, but we are also multiplying the 4 tens by 2 as well. So if we multiply the 2 units by 2, we will get 4. I'll put that in the units column since we multiplied 2 units. And then we move on to the tens. We're doing 4 multiplied by 2, which is 8. And I'm putting that in the tens column because we multiplied 4 tens or 40 by 2. That gives us a final answer of 84, and we've completed the calculation, so I'll rule it off. Moving on to question 2, I'll put the largest number on top, which is 42 again. And we're multiplying by 5, which is a smaller number, so that will go on the bottom. Multiplying the units first, 2 times 5 is 10. And just like column addition and subtraction, I'm going to carry the 1. Then moving on to the tens column, the 4 tens, the 40, is being multiplied by 5 as well. Both numbers are being multiplied by 5. So 4 times 5 is 20, plus the 1 that we carried is 21. And this is going to be written in the tens column, and the 2 will spill over into the hundreds column. So our final answer is 210. Question 3, we have 41 times 7. So start with the units first. 1 times 7 is 7. Write the answer in the units column. Then moving on to the tens column, 4 times 7 is 28. And we'll write this in the tens column and carry the 2 over into the hundreds column. That gives us a final answer of 287. Question 4, we have 37 multiplied by 4. Again, put the largest number on top. Then we start with the units column, so 7 times 4 is 28. Placing the answer in the units column, and anything extra will spill over and be carried into the tens column. Then moving on to the tens column, we do 3 times 4 is 12, plus the 2 we carried is 14, and 14 is going to go into the tens column because we just multiplied a 10, the 3, and in 14 the 1's going to be carried over into the hundreds column. That will give us 148. Now for the final question on the easy section, we have 35 multiplied by 7. Units column first, so 5 times 7 is 35. Writing the answer in the units column and anything else being carried over into the next column. Then on the tens column, we have 3 times 7 is 21, plus the 3 we carried will give us 24. Placing that in the tens column and anything else carried over into the hundreds column. That gives us 243 as our final answer. I just want to point out that the hardest piece of maths you've done here is probably 5 times 7. You'll never get anything harder than 9 times 9 here. It's just all going to be single digit multiplications, and the column method is going to help you combine quite a few different single digit multiplications to create your final answers. Moving on to the medium questions, we're going to start with 93 multiplied by 24. Now, I said in the easy questions that I'm not going to rule off both parts of my answer. I'm just going to rule off the top line. Now, the reason for this is Now we've got a larger multiplication, we're going to end up with more than one line of working out. So let's have a look at how this works. The first thing we need to do is, when we multiply by 24, we're not going to multiply 3 by 24 and 9 by 24. We're going to break it down to smaller bits, and we're just going to multiply by 4 on its own first, and then multiply by the 20 later on. So our first job is to multiply by the 4. So we'll tackle the units column first, and we'll do the 3 units in 93 times the 4, which will give us 12, writing the answer in the units column and carrying the 1 that won't fit in there. Then we're going to multiply the 9, the 90 in 93. So 9 times 4 is 36, plus the 1 we carried will give us 37, placing the answer in the tens column and carrying the 3 over into the hundreds column. So at this point, we've multiplied 93 by just the 4. What's left now is to multiply by 20. So again, going back to the units column, 93 has 3 units. I'm going to multiply that by the 2 by the 20. So 3 times 20 will give us 60. And that's going to go one step over in the tens column, because obviously 60 is going to fit in the tens column. We're multiplying by a larger number now. When we multiplied by 4 units, we put our first number into the units column. Now multiplying by a 10, we're putting our first number into the tens column. So now we've multiplied the 3 by the 2, or the 20. We're now going to multiply the 9 by the 2, which will give us 18. That's going to be one column further over. 18 will come here into the hundreds column, and then the 1 we're carrying will come over into the thousands column. And now I've done this, I can rule off. All that's left now is to use column addition to add up the 2 different answers we have from multiplying by 4 and multiplying by 20 separately. So as usual, units column first, 2 plus 0 is 2. Then the tens column, 7 plus 6 is 13, carrying the 1. Then the hundreds column, 3 plus 8 is 11, plus 1 we carried is 12, carry the 1. Then the thousands column, 1 plus the 1 we carried is 2. So our final answer is 2,230. Moving on to question 2, we have 51 multiplied by 28. We're going to do this again in 2 sections. We will multiply by 8 first, and then we will multiply by 2. So starting with the units, 1 times 8 is 8, and since 8 is in the units column, we're going to write our answer into the units column. Now we've done 1 times 8, we're going to do our 50 times 8, so 5 times 8 is 40, that's going to go into the tens column, and we're going to carry the 4, which will go into the hundreds column. Now we've finished multiplying by 8, we need to multiply by 20. Again, starting off in the units column with 51. So 1 times 2 is 2. And since 2 is representing 20, we're going to write our answer in the tens column here. 20 times 1 will give us 20. Then moving on to the tens column, 5 times 2 is 10. Writing that in the next column over. I'm going to carry the 1 over into the thousands column. Now I can rule off, and we need to add together our 2 answers. So 8 plus 0 is 8, 0 plus 2 is 2, 4 plus 0 is 4, and nothing plus 1 is 1. So our final answer is 1,428. Moving on to question 3, we have 98 multiplied by 24. And again, we'll do this in 2 sections. We'll be multiplying by the 4 units, and then we'll be multiplying by the 2 tens. So multiplying 98 by 4 first, 8 times 4 is 32. And since 4 is in the units column, we're going to write our answer in the units column, carrying the 3. Then we're going to multiply the 9. So 9 times 4 is 36. Plus the 3 we carried will be 39, carrying the 3 over into the hundreds column. Now I'm going to multiply by 20. So 2 times 8 is, and since the 2 is representing 20 in the tens column, we'll go right in 16, starting in the tens column and carrying the 1. What you might like to do here is just fill up any gaps with a 0, because after all, that 2 is representing 20, and 20 times 8 is going to give us 160. Now we're going to multiply the 9 by 2, which gives us 18, plus the one we carried will give us 19, starting in the next available column and carrying the 1 over into the thousands. Our last step is just to add together our two answers. So 2 plus 0 is 2, 9 plus 6 is 15, carry the 1, 3 plus 9 is 12, plus the 1 we carried is 13, and then 1 plus 1 is 2. That gives a final answer of 2,352. Question 4, we have 72 multiplied by 51. Again, we'll do this in two sections. We will multiply by 1 first, and then we will multiply by the 5. So, units column first, 2 times 1 is 2. And since 1 is in the units column, our answer will go into the units column. Then we need to multiply by 7. 7 times 1 is 7, using the next available column. Now multiplying by 5, or it's multiplying by 50. 5 times 2 is 10. And since that 5 is representing 50 in the tens column, we're going to start writing our answer in the tens column, carrying the 1. And again, we've written down 10, but since 50 times 2 is 100, you might just want to fill up the zeros over here. Now doing our final piece of this, 7 times 5 is 35, plus the one we carried is 36, writing our answer in the next available column to the left, and then carrying the 3 over into the thousands column. Now we have our two answers, we just need to add them up. This one's nice and easy. 2 plus 0 is 2, 7 plus 0 is 0, and then the 3 and the 6 are having nothing added to them. So our final answer is 3,672. Our final medium question is 37 multiplied by 62. So starting with the units first, 2 times 7 is 14, carry the 1, and then 2 times 3 is 6, plus the one we carried is 7. Now if multiplied by the 2 is 62, we're going to multiply by the 60, so 6 times 7 is 42, and because the 6 is representing 60 in the tens column, we're going to start writing 42 in the tens column, carrying the 4 into the next column on the left, and again any gaps we can fill in with a 0. Finally, I'm going to multiply 3 by 6, which will give me 18, plus the 4 we carried will give 22, writing that in the next available space to the left and carrying the 2 over into the thousands column. A final step is to add all this up, so 4 plus 0 is 4, 7 plus 2 is 9, and then we have the two 2's which are not being added onto anything. Our final answer is 2,294. The last thing to mention here is that for the first 4 questions I used colour coding, so it's really clear when I'm multiplying by a unit what answer I get there in green, and it's really clear when I'm multiplying by the tens and the answer in purple. With question 5 I just wrote it all in one colour. Now you might want to start off writing with different coloured biros and using this kind of colour coding until you get confident, then eventually you'll be doing it without any colour coding when you fully understand what to do. Moving on to the hard questions, again we have many more numbers to multiply, but we're going to be patient, we're going to follow the same method, and we shouldn't have too much added difficulty. Our first question is 32 times 826, and like I did for the easy questions, I'm going to write the largest number on top. Now to show you why this might be helpful, I'll do this question both ways and we can see if 826 times 32 or 32 times 826 is the easiest method. Like with the medium questions, we're going to separate this up into different sections. So we're going to multiply by units first. Then we multiply it by tens. And then if there are any hundreds, we'll multiply it by hundreds last. So starting with the first version of this question, I'm going to be multiplying by 2 first. I'm going to multiply every single digit of 826 by 2. So units column first, 6 times 2 is 12. And since we times it by 2, which is in the units column, we're going to start writing our answer in the units column, carrying the 1 over into the tens column. Then we're going to do 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 we carried is 5, and then 2 times 8 is 16, carrying the 1. Now we'll multiply by the tens, so 3 times 6 is 18, and the 3 is representing 30 in the tens column. I'm going to start writing 18 in the tens column. Again, any spaces can be filled up with a 0. Then I'll do 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 1 I carried, and then 3 times 8, which is 24, carrying the 2 over into the next column. Then, same as the median questions, we're going to add up our two answers. So 2 plus 0 is 2, 5 plus 8 is 13, carry the 1, 6 plus 7 is 13, plus the 1 we carried is 14, carry the 1, 1 plus 4 is 5, plus the 1 we carried is 6, and then nothing plus 2 is 2. Our final answer is 26,432. Now, I've been telling you to put the largest number on top, but let's have a look at what happens if we don't do that with the same calculation. So, we're going to start off multiplying by the units. We have 6. 6 times 2 is 12. Carry the 1. And then 6 times 3 is 18, plus the 1 we carried is 19. Now I'm going to multiply by the tens, so 2 times 2 is 4. And since the 2 is representing 20 in the tens column, I'm going to write 4 in the tens column, filling up any spaces with a 0. Next is 2 times 3 is 6, write that in the next column, and we are done multiplying the tens. Now looking at the hundreds, we have 8 times 2, which is 16. And since that 8 is in the hundreds column, we're going to start writing 16 in the hundreds column, carrying the 1. And again, any zeros, any spaces can be filled up with 0, because after all, if the 8 is representing 800, then 800 times 2 is 1,600. Next, we have 8 times 3, which is 24, plus the 1 we carried is 25. Now you should see a difference straight away. If we don't put the largest number on top, we've broken this down into more sections, and now we have 3 numbers to add up at the end. So 2 plus 0 is 2. 9 plus 4 is 13, and then we have the 0, so it's still 13, carry the 1. 1 plus 6 is 7. 7 plus 6 is 13, plus the 1 we carried is 14. 5 plus 1 is 6, and then we have a 2 on its own, and you'll see we get exactly the same answer. You'll notice that doing it this way is taking up more space on the page, and we've done more calculations, so I recommend putting the largest number on top and put the smallest number on the bottom. However, if you do forget about this, it's not an issue, you'll get the same answer either way. Moving on to question 2, we have 772 multiplied by 843. You'll notice that I haven't bothered to swap the numbers around. When I am saying put the largest number on top, I'm talking about in terms of number of digits. Since these are both 3-digit numbers, it isn't really going to make a difference. We're doing this in 3 sections. We'll multiply by 3 first, then we'll multiply by 4/10 second, and then we'll multiply by 800 third. So multiplying by the 3 units first. 3 times 2 is 6, and since 3 is in the units column, I'll write my answer in the units column. Then 3 times 7 is 21, carrying the 2. Then 3 times 7 is 21 again, but with the 2 I carried, that will give me 23, carrying the 2. Now moving on to the tens column, we're multiplying by 4. 4 is representing 40, so I'll write my answer in the tens column. 4 times 2 is 8. Again, any gaps we can fill up with a 0. Again, 40 times 2 is 80, so that's correct. 4 times 7 is 28, carrying the 2. And then 4 times 7 is 28 again, plus the 2 I carried will give me 30, carrying the 3. Now multiplying by 8, representing 8 hundredths, so I'll write my answer in the hundreds column. 8 times 2 is 16, carrying the 1. Filling up any spaces with a 0, and again, after all, 8 is representing 800, multiplying by 2 is 1600, which is what I wrote. Now I'm going to do 8 times 7, which is 56, plus the one we carried is 57. Then 8 times 7 again is 56, plus the 5 we carried will give me 61, carrying the 6. Now we just need to add up our 3 answers, so 6 plus 0 plus 0 is 6. 1 plus 8 is 9, plus 0 is 9. 3 plus 8 is 11, plus 6 is 17, carry the 1. 2 plus 0 is 2. 2 plus 7 is 9, plus the 1 we carried is 10, carry the 1. 3 plus 1 is 4, plus the 1 we carried is a 5, and then we have a 6 left over at the end. That gives us a final answer of 650,796. Moving on to question 3, I'm going to write the largest number on top, so 7,594, and I'm multiplying by 15. I've been careful to line up the units, the 4 and the 5, and I've lined up the 10s, the 9 and the 1. I do this in 2 sections, so I'll multiply by the 5 units first, and then I'll multiply by the 110 second. So starting with the units, I'm writing my answer in the units column. 5 times 4 is 20, carrying the 2. Then 5 times 9 is 45, plus the 2 I carried is 47, carrying the 4. Then 5 times 5 is 25, plus the 4 we carried is 29, carrying the 2. Then 5 times 7 is 35, plus the 2 we carried is 37, carrying the 3. Now I'm going to multiply by the 1, and since that's representing 110, I'm going to start writing my answer in the tens column. Little shortcut as well, if you're multiplying by 1, the number's going to stay the same, so we're going to write straight in 4, 9, 5, and 7. Remembering to start writing that in the tens column, and I can fill up any gaps with a 0. The last step is to add this up, so 0 plus 0 is 0. 7 plus 4 is 11, carry the 1. 9 plus 9 is 18, plus the 1 we carried is 19. Then 7 plus 5 is 12, plus 1 we carried is 13. Then 3 plus 7 is 10, plus the 1 we carried is 11, carrying the 1. That gives us a final answer of 113,910. Our next question is 1,374 multiplied by 15. And like I did before, I am writing the largest number as that will save us a bit of space with our calculations later on. There are going to be two steps with this, multiplying by the units first, and then multiplying by the tens. So multiplying by 5 units first, writing our answer in the units column. 5 times 4 is 20, carrying the 2. Then 5 times 7 is 35, plus 2 we carried is 37, carrying 3. 5 times 3 is 15, plus the 3 we carried is 18, carry the 1. And 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 we carried is 6. Now moving on to the tens column, writing our answer in the tens column. We have 1 times 4 is 4. Put that in the tens column. And again, if we're multiplying by 1, all the numbers are going to stay the same, so we can just start to write these in. Fill up any spaces with a 0. Our final step now is to add our two numbers together. So 0 plus 0 is 0. 7 plus 4 is 11, carry the 1. 8 plus 7 is 15, plus the 1 we carried is 16, carry the 1. 3 plus 6 is 9, plus 1 we carried is 10, carry the 1. And 1 plus 1 is 2. That gives us a final answer of 20,610. The final question is 845 multiplied by 887. So starting off with the units, writing our answer in the units column. 7 times 5 is 35. Carry the 3. 7 times 4 is 28, plus the 3 we carried is 31. Carry the 3. Then 7 times 8 is 56, plus the 3 we carried is 59, carrying the 5. Now we're going to move on to the tens, writing our answer in the tens column. So we've multiplied by 7, now we'll multiply by 8. 8 times 5 is 40, starting our answer in the tens column, carrying the 4. 8 times 4 is 32, plus the 4 is 36, carry the 3. And then 8 times 8 is 64, plus the 3 we carried is 67, carrying the 6. Again, any gaps, you can just fill in a 0 whenever you like. Now moving on to the hundreds column, writing our answers starting in the hundreds column. 8 times 5 is 40, carrying the 4. 8 times 4 is 32, plus the 4 we carried is 36, carry the 3. And then 8 times 8 is 64, plus the 3 we carried is 67, carrying the 6. And again, why not fill in the gaps with a 0? Now we just need to add up our answers. So 5 plus 0 plus 0 is 5. 1 plus 0 plus 0 is 1. 9 plus 6 is 15. Plus 0 is 15. Let's carry the 1. 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 plus 6 is 18. Plus 1 we carried is 19. Carry the 1. Then 6 plus 7 is 13. Plus the 1 we carried is 14. Carry the 1. And then 6 plus 1 we carried is 7. So our final answer is 749,515. Again, you'll notice with this question, I didn't use any colour coding, and eventually you'll be at a level of confidence where you don't need it. But again, feel free to use highlighters and different coloured biros to colour code your work while you get yourself confident.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I have explained scratches.